Let me say, first of all, thanks to Ray and his team for inviting me. I have absolutely no idea why, but we'll see. And I'll give you a little story. About 6 years ago, we were going along our way, merrily along, doing what we thought was best in terms of security, when this little company out of Montreal came into us and said, hey guys, let's talk to you about information security. And we decided that we will humor them. And one of the first questions they asked was, what keeps you up at night? And boy, everything came tumbling down. You see, it doesn't matter how big a bank you are or how small a bank you are. Once you're exposed, given all of the current modalities of banking, you are exposed. What followed there was a series of events which have taken us up to today. And I'll briefly go through this for some of you who may not have gone through this process before, or those of you who are thinking about this process. First of all, you had to examine where you were in terms of your security posture. And the first thing that was presented to us was the ISO policies on security, and boy, did we have an awakening. We had to thumb through the ISO 27002 with its 400+ policies to determine what our security posture was. That was followed by proceduralizing these policies and putting them into manageable processes at every level, whether it was HR, IT, risk, and then setting up a security system, a security structure to ensure, one, the integrity of our systems remained intact, that both our financial and our reputational risks were minimized. But more importantly, one of the things that we needed to do, and we needed to do fast, was to create an awareness program across the board so that security became part of the DNA of the organization. That is now followed up by continuous education. It's built into our risk system, because what is happening is that as we prepare ourselves, the guys out there whose job it is to either get financial gain and or reputations out of hacking into bank systems or into customers' accounts, they're getting better at it. Do I sleep better at nights now? Nah. But I'm a little bit heartened by the fact that I know a little bit more. I can react much more quickly. I understand what has to be done. I am continuously learning. The people in my organization are starting to build that DNA. And you would find when you get down to a level of granularity in your organization, you will find out the things that people do that can put you at risk, which you just take for granted. So when you start to build security into your DNA, then you start to look at all of the little things that can compromise you. So I want to say thank you to the Above Security team for, first of all, being a partner with us over the past 6 years and continuing to provide that ring fence around us, as well as the security profile inside of our organization, where, strangely enough, those of you who are not examining it just yet, that's where 80% of your threats are. they're inside of your organization due to ignorance, malice, people just don't care, or you have activism from your newer employees who are 10 times smarter than you ever were. I'll start a little bit with the evolution of banking and take that into how some of the threats have evolved. You know, we have moved from the whole concept of face-to-face banking, you know your customer, the ability to recommend products and services to meet the demands of the customer needs based on the fact that you knew them. And that has transformed dramatically over the past few years to customers selecting and conducting their own transactions online. And that in itself creates great challenges. Now, so we have the conundrum of human elements versus systems. We also have the situation of customers moving away from huge concrete, glass, and steel structures where the image of a bank was one of ultimate security. Their investments were safe. And they're now moving to websites and other electronic channels, and they want the same assurance. Now, customers have also moved away from the banking halls. They don't want to queue in banks anywhere. All right, why would you wait on a teller line to conduct simple transactions, you know, a withdrawal, a deposit, a bill payment, when this can be done anytime from anywhere in the world? I'm sure a few of you have bills to pay and you probably paid them last night. Now, technology has enabled banks to update the methods through which we provide service and ensure customer satisfaction. It has undoubtedly enhanced the ability of banks and a lot of other organizations to reach and effectively service a much wider customer base with essentially the same physical infrastructure. Continuous upgrading and the implementation of new services is a priority to remain competitive in the banking industry, and that brings its own challenges. Now, customers are they now prefer to conduct business in the virtual bank simply because of convenience. All right, now, unlike a physical bank, online banking sites never close. They're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're only a click away. Now, if you're out of state or even out of the country, when a money problem arises, you can log on instantly to your online bank, take care of business 24/7. With our customer service representatives previously, and by no means you would think that these have gone away. As a matter of fact, they make the circle and they come around every time you think that we have gotten rid of them. We have the issue of counterfeit currency, which continues to be a plague. We have the issue of fraudulent checks, money laundering, and our two lawyers have dealt a lot with the issues of money laundering. Now, the bank has the authority to reject the transactions, ask the relevant questions. You know, you have the issue of legal documentation, source of funds, etc., that they can deal with. Today also, we have the issue of ATMs. It has been with us for a little while, and we have the issue of the skimmer scams, the presenter errors, the Lebanese loop. As a matter of fact, just before I left home, we had the issue of the skimmer scams taking place again. It seems to recur every year or so. Prior to this, we had the Lebanese loop. To those of you who don't know what the Lebanese loop is, it's a little device that they put into the card reader, which which keeps your card from coming out, and then through a con artist asking you for your password, they can then get into your account. What has happened is that as we've moved away from the mechanized type of card presenter and we use swipe and card readers, the problem changes. And they basically start putting skimmers in whereby they can actually harvest all of your security information. And once that happens, they can harvest thousands and thousands of customers' information, and then they go shopping. With point of sales, you have dummy terminals, you have wireless terminals. Again, you have skimmers that look like point of sale machines with keystroke loggers installed. And in a lot of instances, you have from the merchant, you have people who are working in cahoots with some merchants who will perpetrate these types of crimes. Mobile and internet banking. With mobile and internet banking, we have found man-in-the-middle sessions, session hijackings, phishing attacks, keystroke loggers, identity theft. Phishing attacks are very prevalent. What has basically happened is that the banks have become so quick to respond, and in a lot of instances, when we have the internal security set up in such a way that you cannot attack the banks themselves, what's the next bet? You attack the customers. The phishing session, I can bet you if you get an email purporting to come from your bank saying that new security systems have been put in and they want to get information, you know, to verify your account and all of this good stuff, 99% of you will probably say, no. My bank has told me not to respond to emails like these. 1% is going to respond. 1% is going to say, maybe this time it's true. The unfortunate thing about it is, notwithstanding the fact that every bank on its website and newspaper, TV advertisement says, don't do it, people will do it. And when they lose their money, they come back to the bank and they say, you know, you got to reimburse me. The bank is faced not only with a financial issue, but a reputational risk, because the bank is seen to be at fault. Now, eCash is a computer-generated, internet-based system which allows funds to be transferred and items to be purchased by credit card, by check, by money order, providing secure online transaction processing. And there are several aspects to security when dealing with eCash. The first one is the issue of the security of the transaction. How does one know that eCash is valid? Encryption and special serial numbers are supposed to allow the issuing bank to quickly verify the authority of eCash. Now, these methods are susceptible to hackers just as paper currency can be counterfeited. The encryption security also has to extend to the smart card chips to ensure that they are tamper resistant. Now, while it is feasible that a system-wide breach can occur, it is highly unlikely at this point. Because just as the federal government in the United States keeps just a step ahead of the counterfeiters at this point, cryptography is also just staying a step ahead of the hackers. How long that's going to last, we're not sure. The physical security of eCash is also a concern. Now, if a hard drive crashes, or if a smart card is lost, the eCash is lost. It's just as if you lost your wallet filled with paper currency. Now, the industry is still developing rules and mechanisms for dealing with such losses, but for most part, the eCash is being treated as paper cash in terms of physical security. And this is something that needs to be carefully considered. The organization at risk, the banks are now open to worldwide attacks. The impacting financial risks are not only the things that we need to deal with. We need to deal with reputational risk. We also need to deal with business continuity, script kiddies, hackers, spear phishing, as I pointed out before, malware and viruses. Now, a lot of customers are not technically empowered with knowledge and tools. Customer interaction is no longer face-to-face, but they're remote, and they're accessing their account from any part of the world, and that makes the problem even greater. Staff, as I pointed out before. Staff provides one of your greatest dangers. Disgruntled employees. You can have malicious attacks coming from within your organization. We have had a lot of downsizing, not only in banks, but we've got a lot of downsizing that has happened in a lot of technology organizations. And it is one of my theories that if you have large technology organizations where they've created ATMs, point of sales, they've created all kinds of banking, electronic banking systems, and you have a large series of downsizing that has been going on. I don't think every single one of those employees would have necessarily been, you know, lily white and honest. And it is no surprise that you have a situation whereby you have such sophistication in the kinds of attacks that are coming at you today. Now, you also have human error, malicious actions by both your customers and your staff, embezzlement. And we have a situation where banks are deploying secure, robust systems on the outside, but your staff is still the weakest link. And then we get to computer crimes and cybercrime. Now, for many years, cybercriminalists or cybercriminals have been motivated by the promise of financial gain. Now, in 2011, we saw the emergence of Lulzsec and Anonymous, all right, which has marked a shift in hacking for money to hacking as a form of protest or to prove a point. And in a lot of instances, they can get onto your websites, they can get into your system to embarrass you, to deface your websites, or to do a lot of stuff which will carry up your reputational risk. And if you're in banking, you're in the business of confidence. And if your customers lose confidence in you, that's worse than stealing from the bank, because it has the potential to close the bank down. Some of the issues that we need to deal with also, and the two speakers prior to my presentation touched on them, is the issue of the governing laws in various jurisdictions. You have the compliance and regulations that go cross-border. We have to deal with operations conforming to best practices, the U.S. Patriot Act and things like that. And in a lot of instances, these laws run counter to the laws of your country. And in some instances, you're literally bullied into dealing with these laws. We've got FATCA, which is coming into being pretty soon. And what happens, it's a major issue for banks now to have to deal with myriad regulations, compliance issues, depending on which countries that you have correspondent banking relationships with. Because if you do not comply, what will happen is that that correspondent banking relationship will be removed from you. So you have got to comply and adhere to best practices, not only in your country, not only in your jurisdiction, but for all of the jurisdictions that you have any kind of contact with. You have the issue of poor systems. poor configuration, poor architecture, little or no maintenance, inadequate testing, poor design solutions, which opens up your system to spear phishing attacks, to hacking, and to malware and viruses. And these are major issues in the 21st century banks. You have the issue of evolving technology. With the evolving technology, information is readily available to the customer, and not all of your customers are honest, upstanding citizens. You have malicious tools and videos out there on the internet which are designed to attack the banks. Then you have the issue of hiring a cyber forensic expert. The availability and cost of these kinds of resources is a difficult thing to deal with. The cost is very high. The availability is very low. And therefore, you would find that small banks tend to have a serious problem in that regard. I'm going to take you to some trends, current trends in the banking industry. And this is a word a few people may probably see for the first time, hacktivism. Now, we understand that customer interface is no longer face-to-face, but people are remotely accessing their accounts. Now, hacktivists typically hack for political purposes. They attack corporations, banks, governments, organizations, and even individuals. Now, these groups can deface websites, they can redirect traffic, they can launch denial of service attacks, and they can steal information to make their point. And that's very dangerous, especially for a bank. Spear phishing. I touched briefly on spear phishing. We have the sending of specific email to a targeted group of recipients, which leads them to a spoofed website, which looks like the authentic website, and the only time you find out that it wasn't is when your account has been probably cleaned out. I spoke to this a little bit earlier on. The bank gets blamed for this, notwithstanding the fact that you are asked not to respond to a lot of these emails and a lot of these notices, which take you to a URL somewhere in Nigeria or China. We've got the issue of farming. Now, farming exploits the vulnerability in a DNS server software that allows a hacker to redirect website traffic to another site. Now, your DNS servers are responsible for resolving internet names into their real addresses. You've got the issue of spyware. You have these malicious programs that can get into the computers. Again, the consumer, you know, when you visit your favorite sites, you download music or something else. Something else comes with it. And what would happen is that you can have these secretly changing your security settings, recording your keystrokes, so that the criminals can now steal your personal information, your passwords, your credit card numbers, and they gain access into your account. Vishing. Vishing uses social media and social engineering over the telephone system. Now, it is most often used in facilities facilitated by voice over IP systems. And they can actually gain access to private, personal, and financial information. Access to and leakage of customer data. This is used to embarrass customers for personal agenda and financial gain. Now, WikiLeaks serves as a prime example of how insider threats can pose significant security risks. The controversy brewed when an army sergeant, a private actually, allegedly accessed and downloaded classified information that he later sent to WikiLeaks. Now, he had security clearance. He didn't necessarily have the authorization to access and download the classified files. So you have a situation in your banks where you have politically exposed persons banking with you. These people can be easily accessed and coerced. Well, they don't even have to be coerced. They just, have to be rewarded appropriately to be able to give information to the opposition for financial gain. And then, the thing is that the bank's reputation suffers tremendously as a result of this. Now, I know my friend Mervyn is going to be a little concerned with this next slide. Cloud computing. Issues surrounding cloud computing, like any new or emerging technology, like the cloud, will face challenges. Now, even the cloud has its boundaries. As we've seen, no data center is ultimately secure from determined hackers. Internal IT staff point out in a lot of instances that it's only a matter of time before we can see security breaches that wind up affecting thousands of customers. And if it hits the cloud, then the situation is amplified. Now, the question I have is, with cloud security issues, will auditors be willing to sign off on cloud security service deployments? That's an issue that banks will have to be very mindful of. Higher use of mobile exploits. Attackers will make more use of mobile exploits. So, for example, BlackBerries, they contain sensitive email equipment, emails. Now you have Bluetooth exploits, blackjacking, blue snuffing. They all allow an attacker to make calls from a victim's phone and take total ownership. Now, for countless years running, the pundits have declared each year, this is the year of mobile malware. Now, although mobile malware grabs headlines, it is not very lucrative, not just yet, because their #1 target is financial information. But that predominantly resides on people's desktops and their laptops. However, with the transition to mobile banking via smartphones and tablets, the game will change. And the security profiles existing for PCs will have to be adopted and even enhanced. Accordingly, the attacker's biggest bang for the buck continues to be attacking Windows systems, largely via operating system and application-level vulnerabilities, as well as third-party plugins with well-known bugs. Now, even so, expect the ongoing negative headlines associated with Android smartphone hacking, or as Bit9's Sverdlov says, to drive more manufacturers to create locked-down Android smartphones, which will obviously be better for securing business users. When it comes to mobile security, a lot of people still want to know when they're going to see giant botnets made up of mobile phones. At the moment, though, the attackers are beginning to launch so-called blended attacks involving the exploitation of phones. Attackers are going to the Android marketplace, pulling down an app, building a backdoor into it, and selling it to an Android app store for a local price, for a lower price. A couple of years ago, for example, a developer managed to get a flashlight app into an app store, even though it contained a tethering feature which violated the policies of wireless carriers. Mobile devices aren't yet under attack to the extent that PCs are, but they still carry a well-known security risk. They tend to get lost or stolen. That fact alone should be reason enough for banks to take a more rigorous approach to securing mobile devices. including tracking them when they go missing. And that's a major security issue for banks, because we're not just talking about mobile phones, we're also talking about mobile point-of-sale devices. We have to also ensure that we have remote wipe capabilities where it proves to be too difficult to recover devices. With the bring your device to work that is taking place today, or the general consumerization of IT, expect to see more organizations attempt to add better security to their employees' mobile devices, including their smartphones. And they had better do it if they know what's good for themselves. Social engineering attacks hit social networks, and all social engineering attacks succeed based not on technological sophistication, but by fooling people. It costs little to send somebody an email that redirects them to a fake PayPal website, which tricks them into entering their actual PayPal username and password, which is then passed on to the attackers. Information can be divulged by playing on the emotions of individuals. Company employees, consultants, business partners, they can always pose security risks that have been hit by insider attacks more than by external attacks. Now, are we maintaining as banks the CIA rule, not that CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability rule when it comes to our auditors? And we've seen a few examples of auditors really failing organizations and failing the shareholders. Vendors, consultants, and business partners. And the question here is, are we dropping our guards in order to maintain relationships? The key question here is, would we do that? Are we doing it? I'm going to give you a few slides here on attack typologies. What we found here is that 54% of the attacks are on internet banking, denial of service around 11%, 28% on malicious intrusion traffic, and again, I see my... Right. So over the last year, we have seen a lot of these attacks. This is in our system, actually. Now, most of the attacks were spear phishing attacks. There were also several malicious attempts by external sources to generate malicious traffic to the network. Now, having 24/7 monitoring and intrusion prevention systems were able to prevent the success of the attacks. Now, what we have also noticed is that once a bank starts gaining international attention, popularity, credibility, and they start getting rewards and recognition. So, for example, First Citizens has been voted one of the 5 safest banks in Latin America and the Caribbean for the past 2 years running. Safest bank in the Caribbean. This is based on several standards. What do you think happens? The hackers, the spammers, the phishers, they suddenly become interested in us. And they target the organization with every attack you can find possible. And that's the reality of the situation. Now, after conducting intensive investigation, we were able to summarize the findings as to the sources of attacks on this chart. And you can see here that Nigeria is way ahead of the game. Strangely enough, Australia comes in second. China, the United States, and Europe. And these are just a few. Now, based on the analysis from the attacks and the information presented here, we are able, and again, because of the kind of partnership we have with Above Security, and this is an unashamed plug for Above Security, we have been able to block traffic generated from certain continents, certain regions, and certain states. We've also found a strange twist now, is that traffic is now being generated from one country purporting to be originated from another. In other words, they're spoofing IP addresses. What we also found is that our web servers face the highest attacks in the network, a whopping 51%. These servers are most frequently targeted hosts on a computer network, and they can gain unauthorized access to the server. They can change information on the site. They can deface the web page. They can access sensitive personal information or install malicious software to launch even further attacks in the future. All right, they are hacking websites that will give full details of a company web server once it's not properly secure. All right. Information such as IP address, ISP, operating system, open ports, etc. They can actually be retrieved in seconds. You can actually buy it. Now, they can craft specific exploits to these existing vulnerabilities. What does this mean to banks? As we have said before, banks are susceptible to many forms of risk, financial, reputational, leading the charge. It means, therefore, that they must be aware of cyber, financial, reputational risks can occur anytime. And therefore, compliance with legislative and policy objectives must be paramount in their risk profile. It therefore has to become part of your DNA. It tells you that customers are the criminals, or can be the criminals. Criminals can be your customers. Customers can be the target of criminals. Either which way you take it, we're in trouble. It means, therefore, before I go on to that point, young employees, they are more risk takers and they are driven by the desire for easy rewards. We've got the instant gratification Y generation that works for us now, folks. Let's face the reality. And they are driven by a desire for easy rewards. There's the motivation of economic and financial benefits, and there's insider fraud, employee collusion with external fraudsters, which will satisfy a lot of that. It means, therefore, that you need to strengthen and enhance the existing controls given the operations of your business. It means that there's a continuous review and update of the information security policy is absolutely required. Your information security based on ISO 27002 is the standard for the information security management. Physical security requirements for information systems must be adhered to without any kind of compromise. And reporting of information security events and weaknesses becomes paramount, and action on it is also necessary in the short term. Creating and maintaining business continuity plans is also important, because we're not only dealing with continuity plans now for disasters as we know them, but for these kinds of disasters that can occur as a result of cyber criminals and the internal threats that we face. We have to keep monitoring for compliance, because the criminals are not standing still. We have to strengthen and enhance existing controls which govern the operations of our business. Because financial losses and reputational losses are becoming larger for single events, and they're having a higher negative impact on reputation and on confidence in the banks. Can we trust our employees? Can anyone stand up here and say that you trust all of your employees implicitly, given all that we have said here today? Can we trust our customers, our vendors? We find in a lot of instances that employees in positions of trust for decades are becoming the biggest policy violators. They know the kinks, they know the loopholes. You have to review with your vendors or your in-house technology departments any needed security upgrades and cost of upgrades to current technology contracts to cover a lot of these new requirements. All right? Now, there are demands to reduce cost, and that has led to the adoption of managed services. So information, in a lot of instances, are effectively outside of the control of the organization. How are you going to manage that, especially as a bank? And last but not least, continuous educational and awareness programs must be in place. As I said, it must form part of the DNA of your organization. With the increase in knowledge of information technology by employees, there is now more exposure to internal attacks. Because attackers are targeting the weakest link in the process chain, which is people, both outside and inside. Continuous education, therefore, must be geared towards both your customer and your staff, since social engineering attacks are on the increase, and they're even perpetrated by what we considered in the past to be the least educated of our customers. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I did not scare you too much, but this is the reality of the financial services industry in which we are. You need to take the necessary steps to ensure that you are at least one step behind the attackers, because they're always ahead of you. They always know what you're going to do next. It is very important that you align yourself to an organization, because you can't do it on your own unless you really have the kind of resources that will allow you to do this, because it's very costly and it's very time-consuming. Align yourself to an organization who can guide you. It's not a one-day process, as we have found out. It takes a very long time to be able to adopt a security posture which will allow you to manage these risks in a reasonable manner. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being so patient with me and for giving me a listening ear. Thank you.